friends down in Tampa at the Republican convention were more than happy to talk about everything they think is wrong with America. But they didn't have much to say about how they'd make it right. Have a surplus? Try a tax cut. Deficit too high? Try another. Feel a cold coming on? Take 2 tax cuts, roll back some regulations, and call us in the morning.
What's potentially more important to the president than his own convention speech last night? This morning's jobs report, and it looks pretty good. The unemployment rate comes in at 8.1%, which is down from 8.3% in July. The economy added 96,000 to non-farm payrolls, though that was below the expectation of 125,000. Sudeep Reddy joins us from Washington this morning to break down the numbers. Sudeep, morning. What do you think?
It's certainly a mixed bag, Rolf. The unemployment rate dropping is a good sign. We'll have to see what actually drove that drop in the unemployment rate. The payroll's coming in below 100,000. Obviously, yet another disappointment. It shows that we haven't really made any meaningful progress in the labor market, and it will at least stoke suspicions that we're slipping again, even though it's not really a statistically significant difference from what a lot of people were expecting for this report.
Okay, Sudeep, now just briefly, we'll get to the details of the report in a minute with Phil. What's the impact of this report in particular on the election?
I think, Rolf, you're going to see that Democrats and Republicans will be saying exactly what they were saying before about the job market and the economy after this report. The payroll numbers, by being weak, will give the GOP a chance to argue that we haven't really made a meaningful recovery, which is true. And the unemployment rate dropping will at least relieve Democrats who might have been worrying about a sharp increase in the jobless rate in the coming months, and at least that gives them a chance to say that we're making slow progress. But of course, we're still above 8%, which is the big talking point in this election.
Okay, I want to jump over to Phil Izzo, who is in the newsroom, just digging through the report, breaking it down for us. Phil, what sticks out for you?
This is not a good report, Ralph. I mean, if we take a look at the unemployment rate, the reason why it dropped was people dropping out of the labor force. The number of employed people actually fell last month. The only reason why the unemployment rate dropped is because they were overwhelmed by the number of unemployed people who are no longer in the labor force. The participation rate, which is the number of people who are out there looking for a job, dropped by 0.2 percentage points this month. That's not good news. That's people giving up and leaving the labor force.
Phil,
Excuse me.
Talk a second about the participation rate over time, the trend. How has that trended, particularly over the last 4 years?
Yeah, that trend has been lower. I mean, a good portion of that is people who are retiring. There are a lot more baby boomers in the labor force, and some of those people who lost their jobs were relatively close to retirement anyway, so they were not participating anymore in the labor force. So we expect to see that trend develop over the last couple of years, but it's really accelerated in the recession as people who lost their jobs just gave up looking for work.
Phil, 2 other things I want to get to before we get back to Sudeep. Average hourly wages, how has that been trending? Still roughly flat?
I'm taking a look at hourly earnings. We're actually down slightly this month from last month. So, I mean, it's still on that sort of stagnant trend over the long term. It's up a little bit from last year, but still not near inflationary rates. It's not keeping track with inflation.
Oh, okay. Now, and last, before we jump back to Sudeep, revisions to prior jobs reports. How did those come in?
I got to take a quick look. I don't have the revisions right in front of me.
We'll tell you about. We'll get those in a minute. Sudeep, let's talk a little bit about the president has gotten a fairly big boost from central bankers, especially recently. A fun fact for people: he gave his convention speech last night on the day the S&P 500 hit its highest point during his presidency. And that was, of course, thanks to Mario Draghi saying that the ECB, there we have the S&P 500 on screen for folks, and President Obama, of course, took office right to the left of where that bottom tick happened. And, of course, Mario Draghi said he would really start a bond buying program in Europe. Now, how does this report impact Ben Bernanke's thinking?
Well, that action from Mario Draghi, at least those words at the European Central Bank, probably saved Barack Obama's chances to at least fight 2 more months for the election. If we had a Eurozone meltdown, that would pretty much close the book on him. But with the Fed, now we're looking at a job market that is obviously still in some distress. It looks like the revisions put prior month's payroll growth somewhat lower than they were before, so the trend is even worse coming into this report. And it basically ensures that Ben Bernanke next week, when the Fed meets, will take some action to boost the economy. He will certainly extend the Fed's guidance to keep rates low. Now it's at late 2014, and he's probably going to extend that to some point in 2015. The big debate, of course, is going to be about QE3 doing another bond buying program at the Fed, and this report significantly raises the odds that the Fed would take action next week on that front. Though at the very least, we're going to see some form of easing from the Fed next week. Okay,
Phil, I want to get the last word to you. Any other things that jump out to you in particular from this jobs report?
Yeah, it's really not a good report. If you take a look at the industries, basically any of the manufacturing, the construction industries, they were all either flat or lost jobs. All of the job gains came in the service industry, and even there, they were very, very muted. Education and health services, which has been one area of strength, continued to add jobs, but government cut jobs, mining cut jobs, manufacturing cut jobs. It's just, it's not looking too great.
Great. Phil, Sudeep, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, for the market's reaction on this jobs number, we'll have more later in the program, and of course on Markets Hub at 10:30.